The Zarethian Empire ship floated outside the great station like a metal beast in space. Its hull was dark and sharp, its engine silent, but full of power. Inside the ship, alien diplomats, prepared for an important meeting, their long robes moved like shadows, their voices cold and full of pride. They had come to speak with the humans not as equals, but as rulers. They believed Earth was small and weak. They believed the talks would be short. They believed Earth would bow. The station where the meeting would take place was large and peaceful. Its lights blinked softly in the dark, its air full of quiet energy. Guards from many worlds stood at the door, some tall, some with tails, some with glowing eyes, but all were still as the great Zarethians walked through the halls. Inside the main meeting room, the chairs were set, the table long and smooth, floating just above the floor, glowing faintly with blue light. Translators sat in the corners, ready to work. Cameras hidden in the walls blinked once and waited. The Zarethians took their seats in silence, their faces proud, their eyes scanning the room like hawks. They did not have to wait long. A second door opened, and from it came two figures. The first was the human ambassador, his suit clean, his eyes calm. He walked with a small smile and a straight back. He looked polite and respectful, but sure of himself. Behind him came the second figure, and at once the air in the room changed. He was tall for a human, his body wrapped in black armor, not shiny but smooth and quiet like the night. His face was still, his eyes hidden behind a thin black visor. He moved like a shadow, but every step felt heavy, as if he carried the weight of 1,000 battles. The Zarethians looked at him, then at each other. This was not what they expected. The Zarethians had expected guards, yes, but not one, not just one, and not this quiet, cold figure, who looked more like a machine than a man. One of the Zarethians leaned forward and whispered to his neighbor, "Why only one human?" he asked, his voice low. "Maybe he is more than just a guard." The other answered. The room felt tighter. The ambassador gave a slight bow and spoke, "Greetings from Earth. Thank you for meeting with us today." The words were friendly, but the Zarethians barely heard them. Their eyes were still on the bodyguard. He did not speak, he did not move. His hands rested at his sides, his head slightly tilted, as if listening to something far away. One of the younger Zarethians, a tall soldier with red skin and silver armor, gave a short laugh. "Is this your idea of safety?" he asked. "Just one guard? Humans must be braver than we thought, or perhaps more foolish." The human ambassador did not respond to the insult. Instead, he looked at his bodyguard. The man in black did not blink. The room grew quiet again, the air heavy with something no one could name, not fear, not yet, but something close, something cold, something strange. A translator dropped a small tool. It clinked on the floor and echoed in the silent room. The Zarethian leader sat back in his chair, watching the human guard closely. He tried to find weakness. He found none. The man was like a statue, but one made of fire and ice. The human bodyguard looked at no one and at everyone at the same time. His presence filled the room, though he said nothing, though he made no threat. In a room full of powerful beings, it was the silent one who made everyone hold their breath. One of the guards near the door shifted his weight. His boot made a soft sound on the floor. The bodyguard's head turned just slightly. The guard froze. He did not move again. Even the cameras seemed to go quiet. The ambassador continued to speak, calm and polite, talking of trade and peace, but the words felt like background noise. The real center of the room was the bodyguard. No one wanted to admit it, not yet, but something had changed. The Zarethians who had come to demand now sat without speaking. The soldiers who had walked in proud now kept their hands still, their eyes low. They did not know who this man was. They did not know his name or his history, but they could feel it deep in their bones. This was not just a guard, this was a warning. And somewhere deep inside every Zarethian heart, a single thought began to grow. Maybe Earth was not weak. Maybe Earth was hiding something powerful. Maybe this human was the reason. The meeting had just begun, but the war might already be over. The air in the room did not move. It felt tight. It felt heavy, as if something unseen pressed down. From above, the Zarethian diplomats sat tall and proud, but their hands rested too still, their eyes too wide. The sound of the human ambassador's voice filled the space, speaking of peace, of agreements, of future friendship. But no one listened to the words. All ears were tuned to silence. All eyes flicked again and again to the man in black armor. He stood behind the ambassador, close, but not too close, not stiff, but not relaxed either. He did not blink. He did not tilt his head. He was just there like a shadow that belonged to no light. The tallest of the Zarethians, General Voro, leaned forward, his metal claws clicking once on the table. He wore gold across his shoulders, medals from victory's planets taken lives, ended. He had faced war beasts, plasma storm soldiers, with fire in their blood. But this man, the human, who did not move, made him sweat beneath his armor. He turned to the ambassador and spoke with a grin wide, but false. Tell me, human, why only one guard? Surely a peaceful people would send more. The ambassador did not flinch. He looked at Voro and answered, we believe in efficiency, General. A few of the alien soldiers chuckled, their voices deep and rough, but their laughs died quickly. The bodyguard remained still, but something about him pulled the warmth from the room. Another diplomat leaned to whisper in her commander's ear. Her skin was pale blue, her voice sharp like ice. I do not like this, she said. Something feels wrong. That man has not moved an inch. Commander Delrix gave a small nod but said nothing. His thoughts were spinning faster than the station's orbit. He had seen killers. Before he had seen warriors, assassins, machines. This was something else, not a tool, not a brute, not a pet. This human was something made with purpose, and that purpose had nothing to do with guarding. The talks continued. The ambassador moved through the points of the treaty, his voice even and clear, but the tension was growing under the surface, like a silent wave ready to crash. The Zarethians kept shifting in their seats, trying not to glance at the human, trying not to think about what he might do. One soldier could not help it. He stood a bit taller, trying to show strength, trying to mask the crawling fear inside him. He was young, proud, full of anger and energy. He stared at the bodyguard hard, trying to make him flinch, trying to prove to himself that the man was just a man. He failed. The human did not blink. That was when the energy in the room truly changed, like lightning in the air, before a storm, like dry grass, before a wildfire. Something was coming, and no one could stop it. General Voro slammed a clawed hand on the table, his voice rising. Why do you bring him into this room? He is no diplomat. He brings no peace. He is a threat. The ambassador turned slowly, his face calm. He replied softly, we bring what we must to protect peace. Voro stood. He pointed at the human and shouted, you bring war. That thing behind you is war. The human bodyguard moved. No one saw his feet shift. No one saw his arms rise. There was no blur, no sound. He did not draw a weapon. He did not shout. He only took a single step forward, just one. And every soldier in the room reached for their weapons at the same time. But no weapon was fired, no threat was made. The human just stood in that new spot, one step closer. And now the gap between him and the table, between him and every Zarethian, was small, too small. The energy in the room turned into ice. Breath froze, hands shook without permission, eyes widened without shame. The ambassador raised one hand and the human stepped back to his original place, calm again, still again, silent again, but the moment had done its work. Now the truth was laid bare. This man was not here to guard. This man was here to warn. The Zarethians knew war. They were born in it, raised in it. They had ended civilizations, burned cities, made stars fall, but none of their memories, none of their scars prepared them for this. This was not the enemy they had feared. This was something far worse, something that could end wars before they began, something that did not need to fight to win. Voro sat down, his voice quiet. Now, what is he? What do you call him? The ambassador looked at the man in black. He calls himself nothing, but some know him as Hyperion-class bodyguard. A murmur passed through the Zarethians. That word Hyperion, they had heard it whispered before, in space stations, in dark places, among frightened traitors and broken mercenaries, rumors of humans who were trained not to kill, but to end wars with their presence alone. Delrix swallowed hard. He tried to speak, but his throat felt dry. He drank from his silver cup, but the water tasted wrong. It tasted like fear. In the corner, the youngest Zarethian translator dropped her data pad. It hit the floor with a loud crack. She bent to pick it up, but her hands were shaking. The bodyguard did not move. The ambassador continued to speak, now outlining the terms of shared space rights, of safe travel, of joint research. But the Zarethians were not listening, not anymore. Their minds were full of one question. If this is only the guard, then what else is Earth hiding? The talks went on for another hour, the words spoken, the agreements half made, but the deal was already changing, not on paper, but in their minds. Before this meeting they thought Earth was soft, weak, kind. Now they knew better. Now they feared Earth, not because of its ships, not because of its numbers, but because of one man who never blinked, who never spoke, who made them feel powerless without touching a thing. The meeting ended. The ambassadors bowed. The guards stood straight. The documents were placed in silver cases, but the story was already burning through the hearts of every alien in the room. The tale of a single human who could stop a war without lifting a finger. and none of them would ever forget the sound of silence. After the meeting ended, the Zarethian group returned to their side of the neutral station. Their boots clicked softly against the metal floor, their voices low and uncertain. The walk through the halls felt longer than before. The walls felt closer and colder, as if the station itself had heard the silence in the room and now chose not to speak. General Voro walked at the front, but his usual strength was gone. He glanced back at the rest of his group, then looked ahead again, his face locked in thought. The other diplomats followed, some whispering, some silent. No one smiled. Commander Delrix walked beside him, his fingers twitching, as if expecting something to strike from the shadows. Each turn in the corridor made him tense. He kept remembering the human bodyguard, and how he had stepped forward once, and only once, but it had been enough. They reached the private chamber made for their delegation. The door slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, the lights were warm, the walls decorated with symbols of Zarethian power, images of victories carved in gold and stone, but the room now felt smaller and the decorations less proud. General Voro sat heavily in the high chair at the center of the room. He removed his shoulder armor and placed it on the table. It made a heavy sound against the surface. He stared at it, as if it might explain the feeling crawling under his skin. "What is he?" Voro finally asked. "No one in particular." No one answered at first. Then one of the younger aides stepped forward, his voice shaky. "He is a Hyperion-class." The human said that word. "Yes, Hyperion-class," Delrix repeated, as if tasting the name. "For the first time I heard stories. Once during the revolt on Yarden 3, a mercenary captain spoke of a human with no name, just a title, Hyperion. He said that human walked into a battlefield without a weapon, and the enemy surrendered in 10 minutes. Voro looked up. 10 minutes. Delrix nodded. "Yes, they say he stood in the open, walked through the gunfire. Not one shot hit him. Not one soldier dared to aim." "Do you believe it?" Voro asked. "I did not until today." The room went quiet again, each alien lost in his own thoughts. One of the soldiers, the same, who had tried to stare down the bodyguard earlier, stepped closer. He rubbed the back of his neck, then looked at Voro. "General, I must report something strange." "Speak." When I looked at him, I felt something deep, like a weight behind my eyes, like something was watching me from inside him, something old and cold, and not human. It was not anger, it was not violence, but it was still dangerous, very dangerous. Another diplomat spoke. I felt it too. My heart began to race, my breath slowed, as if my body wanted to freeze, to hide. Voro leaned back, his claws tapping the arm of his chair slowly, like the beat of a warning drum. "He never spoke," the general said. "Not once, not even when insulted, not even when we drew close. He had no reaction." "That is the reaction," Delrix said softly. "He does not need words." Then one of the eldest Zarethians rose from his seat. He had not spoken during the meeting. His eyes were deep with age and memory, his voice slow and sure. "We are not just soldiers," he said. "We are leaders, and leaders must listen not just to words, but to feelings, and every feeling I had in that room tells me the same truth, that human was not there to protect the ambassador. He was there to end the war before it began." Voro looked at him, then looked around at the others. "You think Earth brought him as a threat?" "No," the elder said. "I think Earth brought him as a message." "And what is the message?" "That Earth does not fear us, and that if we push them, they will not break. They will end us quickly." No one argued, no one laughed, no one scoffed. The silence returned again, like the cold edge of a blade resting against the neck. Then a low hum broke, the quiet, a soft alarm from the communication wall blinking with a new message. Voro pressed it. The screen lit up, showing a map of the station, a red signal blinking. "The ambassador has invited us to dinner," Voro read aloud, his voice tight. "Dinner?" "Yes." "With the bodyguard?" "Yes." The room felt even colder. Voro stood again, placing his armor back onto his shoulders, his face unreadable. "We will go," he said. "Why?" one of the aides asked. "Because if we refuse, they will know we are afraid, and if we show fear, now the balance will never return." The others stood slowly, each one thinking the same thought. How did one human cause this? As they prepared to leave, Voro paused by the door, his hand resting on the edge. He did not look back when he spoke. "If one human can make us feel like this, with just his presence, what will happen if he speaks?" No one answered. The door slid open, and the delegation moved forward, once more through the quiet halls of a station, towards another meeting, towards another room, with blue lights and soft chairs. But this time, they would not be walking in with pride. This time they would walk in with caution. And perhaps that was exactly what the humans wanted. The dining hall was not a place for war, yet tonight it felt like one. The walls were painted in soft gold, with vines of living green twining down. From the ceiling the lights glowed warm. The floor was polished until it shone like glass reflecting boots, chairs, and the occasional nervous step. The table stretched long across the center, its surface dark wood from earth, smooth and without edges. Dishes were set, plates crafted from stone, cups carved from sea crystal, drinks from 3 planets, and food prepared with care by humans and station chefs, everything meant to show peace, to honor the gathering and offer comfort. But comfort did not walk through the door when the Zarethian delegation entered. General Varro led them once more, though his steps were slower than before. His claws tapped the floor lightly, his eyes scanned the room, not for food, not for allies, but for danger. Behind him Delrix walked with a stiff back. 2 soldiers flanked them, and 3 aides followed, their faces unreadable, though none spoke. Their minds screamed with the same single thought: "Where is he?" Then they saw him. At the far end of the table he stood, behind the human ambassador, black armor, untouched, hands behind his back, motionless, like a statue built for memory, not battle, yet still somehow built for destruction. He did not move as they entered. He did not greet them. He did not even seem to breathe. Varro gave a small nod to the ambassador, who smiled warmly and motioned for them to sit. "Please take your places. Friends, Earth is honored by your company." The Zarethians obeyed, though the word friends echoed strangely in their ears. Each took their seat carefully, movements slow and eyes cautious. They did not look at the food, though it smelled rich with spices. They did not sip the drink, though it shimmered like stars in a bottle. Their eyes stayed on the man in black. He had still not moved. The ambassador raised a glass. "Welcome to the table of peace. May our words feed understanding, and our silence leave no bitterness." He drank and placed his cup down. His bodyguard did not follow the motion. His hands remained behind his back, his visor pointed slightly downward, but not at the ground, not at his feet, at nothing and everything. Delrix leaned close to Varro and whispered, "He has not even sat." Varro did not answer. The meal began. Humans smiled. Humans served. Plates were passed. Dishes tasted. Forks clicked gently against plates. But the Zarethians ate little. Some poked at their food, some touched it to their lips, but none chewed more than they had to. The ambassador told stories of Earth, stories of storms of whales and great oceans of trees that sang in the wind, but the words floated like mist around the table, unable to settle, unable to take root. Then one of the Zarethian soldiers made a mistake. He was young, strong, still proud in his own way. He watched the bodyguard too long, and something in him broke or sparked or burned. He rose slowly and walked to the side table where drinks were offered and paused there as if choosing. But his eyes were not on the drinks. They were on the human. He picked up a silver flask from the corner shelf, made of bright alloy, smooth and shiny. It was a gift from an Earth diplomat from another station. He turned it slowly in his hand and then looked at the bodyguard. "Your armor is dark," he said, voice raised so everyone could hear. "It does not shine." The human did not move. The soldier walked closer, 1 step, 2 steps, until only the length of the table stood between them. "I wonder," he said quietly, "do you fear your reflection?" The room went still. The forks stopped. The drinks paused midair. The human did nothing. The soldier lifted the flask and tilted it just enough for the smooth surface to reflect the face of the man in black. But there was no face, only shadow. Then the flask flew from his hand and clattered across the floor. The bodyguard had moved. No one had seen how no one had seen when, but the flask had left the soldier's hand, not thrown, not dropped, simply taken. The bodyguard now stood 1 step forward, his hand lowering back to his side, and the soldier stood, frozen eyes, wide breath, held mouth half open. His legs trembled. The ambassador did not look back. The human said nothing. The soldier returned to his seat, without a word, face pale, sweat running down his neck. Varro closed his eyes once and opened them again. He now understood something deeper than before. This was not a warrior who wished for battle. This was a storm held back by a single thread. This was a weapon that had chosen silence, not because it lacked voice, but because it did not need one. The dinner ended without dessert. Plates were cleared slowly, hands shaking slightly. As they passed the silverware, the human bodyguard resumed his original position, without comment, without acknowledgement, without expression. When the final course was gone, and the table cleared, the ambassador stood. "Once more we thank you for your time," he said, "your wisdom and your presence. We look forward to finishing the treaty tomorrow in full." Varro stood slowly, Delrix beside him, the others following with heads bowed slightly, not in respect, but in something close. As they reached the exit, Voro paused and turned. He looked at the bodyguard, and for a single second their eyes met, or at least he thought they did. He felt something. Not heat, not ice, not fear, not hate. Something cold and vast, something silent, and endless like the dark between stars. He turned away and walked out. Outside in the hallway, Delrix finally spoke softly. "Do you believe we could win against them?" Voro did not answer right away. His claws clicked lightly on the floor as they moved. "I believe if he stepped onto a battlefield, we would not be given time to surrender." Silence followed. Then Delrix spoke again. "We came here to force terms, to press Earth, to give us what we wanted. Now I only want to leave with peace." And not a single shot was fired. No war. No battle. Just a warning in silence. And the message was clear. The station slept while stars moved slowly beyond its walls. A quiet hum filled the air, a heartbeat of machines, a rhythm of peace. But peace did not sleep inside the Zarethian quarters, not tonight. General Voro stood by the viewing window, his eyes locked on the darkness outside. His reflection was dim against the glass, a shadow of a warrior who had once feared nothing. Now he watched space, as if it held secrets he had never dared to imagine. Behind him, Delrix paced back and forth, his boots soft against the silver floor. He mumbled thoughts under his breath, numbers, memories, names, trying to make sense of the shape that silence had taken at the dinner table. The 8 sat in silence. None of them looked at each other. They each stared at empty space, their minds trapped in the same loop, the same image, the bodyguard stepping forward, the flask gone from a soldier's hand, the storm wrapped in skin. "We need information," Voro said finally, his voice low but clear. "We cannot act from fear. We must know what we are facing." Delrix stopped walking and nodded. "There are file stories, whispers, some official, most not. I can try to pull the most common ones, cross-check what matches." "Do it." Delrix opened his wrist pad. The screen glowed pale blue. His fingers moved fast, typing commands, breaking through soft firewalls placed by the humans, not too strong, almost as if they wanted this information to be found. He opened a folder titled Class Hyperion. The screen filled with names, all redacted, locations, blurred images, too damaged to trust, but patterns began to appear. Every time a Hyperion was present, wars ended quickly, not because of weapons, not because of armies, but because someone changed their mind, someone surrendered, someone walked away. Delrix tapped a case, file 1 with audio, no image, just sound. A voice spoke low and tired. "This is Commander Jolt. We were ready to take the ridge. Our drones mapped the area. We had numbers advantage." Then the human walked in, no armor, no weapons, no backup. He walked right up to our line and waited. He stood there for 17 minutes. Did not move, did not speak. I sent scouts to flank. He watched them. Before they moved, I gave the order to fire, and no one obeyed. They looked at him and could not breathe. It was like he held the weight of death in his eyes. Another file began, a ship captain speaking fast. "We tried to warn them not to attack the freighter. We told them the escort was Hyperion-class. They thought it was a joke. They thought humans lied. 3 minutes later, we received a surrender signal from their command vessel." Voro stepped closer, his arms crossed. The words echoed in his mind, Hyperion-class. "What does it mean?" Delrix asked. "It means Earth has found a way to turn fear into a soldier," Voro said, softly, "not through destruction, but through presence." Then he paused, his eyes narrowing, his thoughts spinning. "No, not just presence. Through reputation. Through legend. They do not need Hyperions to fight, because no one dares to test if the stories are true." He turned to his aides. "Bring me everything we have on Earth's military projects. I want timelines, names, places, anything that hints at this class." An aide nodded and activated her own data pad. Screens blinked to life, showing charts and logs shared over years of diplomatic contact, but hidden in plain sight. A project called Quiet Flame. A training facility deep in frozen mountains, where no visitors were ever allowed. A list of soldiers who vanished from the public record after age 20. A treaty signed by 5 rival species, all within days of losing a single battle, where no human troops had officially been involved. Delrix looked up from the screen. "This is not coincidence, this is strategy." Voro nodded. "Earth has created weapons not to be used, but to be seen." Then a new voice entered the room. From the door came the sound of soft boots and a familiar tone. The human ambassador stood there, calm and smiling as always. Behind him, the same shadow followed the same man in black armor, silent as space. "Forgive the late visit," the ambassador said. "I thought you might have questions, and I wanted to offer answers." The Zarethians stood slowly, each one trying to appear collected, though their hands betrayed them, their claws flexed, their spines stiffened. "Please," the ambassador continued, "let us speak not as diplomats, but as people who wish to avoid mistakes." Voro gestured to the chairs. They all sat. The human bodyguard remained standing at the back. Not a word, not a glance, not a sound. "You call him Hyperion," Voro said. "That is not his name," the ambassador replied. "It is his designation. His name was given up when he chose the path." "And what is that path?" "To stand where war might begin and keep it from ever starting." Voro leaned forward. "What are they? What makes them?" The ambassador's smile faded slightly. "They are born like others, but chosen for a different purpose, trained for 10 years. Without contact from the outside world, they learn not just tactics, but silence, control, observation. They learn the weight of presence, how to become a signal, not a soldier." "And how many are there?" The ambassador looked to his bodyguard, then back at Voro. "I cannot say." "Or you will not." "Correct." Delrix asked, "Why send him now? Why here?" "Because you would not listen to words alone." "So he was the threat?" "No, he was the message." "And what was the message?" "That war with Earth will not be a game, and it will not be long, and it will not be fair." The room was quiet again. The bodyguard did not move, but every Zarethian felt watched, felt seen, felt smaller than they were moments ago. The ambassador stood. "We wish peace," he said, truly and deeply, "but we also understand fear, so we brought it with us, not to use, but to show." He walked to the door. The bodyguard followed, and as they reached it, the ambassador paused. He turned his head slightly and said one last thing. "You may think of him as a weapon, but he is not. He is a warning." Then they were gone, and the room felt colder. The station was quiet again, but now the silence meant something more. It was not the silence of rest or peace or waiting. It was the silence of decision. Inside the Zarethian quarters, General Voro stood before the long table where documents had been laid out. The treaty, once meant to be shaped by force, now lay untouched, the ink dry, the words ready yet meaningless unless agreed. Delric stood nearby, his arms crossed, his mind racing. He read every line again, though he knew the contents by heart. The soldiers around them looked at each other, not with pride, not with challenge, but with silent question. "What now?" Voro spoke without looking up. "He wants peace, we know that." Delric nodded, "But he brought war with him." "No," Voro said slowly, "he brought what war becomes when Earth does not want to fight and still must win." He turned to his staff. "Every one of you has seen battle, has watched enemies fall and comrades bleed, but none of you have seen what we saw at that table. Not a weapon drawn, not a command given, and yet not one of us dared to test him." He walked to the window and looked into space, not at the stars, not at the passing ships, but into something deeper, the space between decisions, the moment before action. They trained him to end wars. The others said nothing, but their silence was an answer. Across the station, the Earth ambassador stood before a window of his own, the bodyguard behind him, as always unmoving, unreadable, yet entirely known to every leader who had met him. The ambassador held a small cup, steam curling from the surface. He watched it rise, watched it vanish, and then spoke softly to the man behind him. "They will sign." The bodyguard said nothing. "I can feel it now." No reply. The ambassador smiled and took a slow sip. When the Zarethian delegation returned to the conference hall, there were no speeches, no greetings, no ceremony. Voro stepped forward, placed a single data chip on the table, and looked at the ambassador. "Terms accepted." The ambassador nodded, his voice calm and respectful. "Thank you, General. Your wisdom will not be forgotten." He gestured to the small screen at the center of the table. "Press to confirm if you agree." Voro did so without hesitation. Delric followed, then the aides, and then the last soldier, the youngest, his hand trembling only slightly. On the screen, words turned from gray to green, and then to gold. "Treaty complete." The human ambassador looked to his bodyguard, who gave a small nod, a movement so slight it might have been imagined, yet it carried the weight of 1,000 victories. "You will have safe access through our trade lanes," Voro said. "You may build on the moons near Sector 8. We will not interfere." "And we will do the same," the ambassador replied. "May this be the start of something greater." Voro gave one final look at the man in black, then turned to leave. His shoulders no longer heavy, not because the weight had lifted, but because the choice had been made. In the corridors outside, the Zarethians moved with purpose, not fear, not pride, not defeat, but something close to understanding. No one spoke until the shuttle doors closed around them. Inside, the craft Voro sat quietly staring at the stars ahead. Delrix finally asked, was that surrender? No, Voro answered, that was survival. The bodyguard remained behind at the station, still as the metal that held it in orbit, his task complete, without violence, without threat, without sound. Later, across the galaxy, stories began to spread. The Zarethians had bowed to Earth not because of numbers or ships or weapons, but because of one man. Some said he had moved faster than sight. Others said he could stop a heart with a stare. None had proof, all had belief. In distant cantinas, mercenaries whispered, if a Hyperion is near, walk away. In royal courts, advisors told kings, if Earth sends a diplomat, ask who walks behind them. At military briefings across 5 systems, officers spoke the new rule, if Earth sends one bodyguard, do not engage. Earth did not confirm the stories. Earth did not deny them. Earth only watched as fear spread faster than any fleet. The program that made him remained hidden. The name Hyperion became legend, not title, not rank, but symbol. And the human who had stood without speaking became more than memory. He became message. A message that war was no longer measured in battles, but in choices. A message that peace backed by silence could be louder than 1,000 guns. At a small academy on a quiet moon, a young Zarethian student asked her instructor, is the Hyperion real? The teacher paused and then said, if he is not, then Earth is even more dangerous. Years later, when that student became a commander, she would tell her crew the same story before every mission. Respect Earth not because they speak softly, but because they have taught silence to speak. Back on Earth, the ambassador returned to headquarters and filed his report. Treaty secured, no resistance, Hyperion presence sufficient. No need for further action. He placed the file into a system that no one could see and closed the case. The bodyguard walked away from the chamber into shadows deeper than space itself. He passed by soldiers and none saluted. He passed by officers and none dared speak. He entered a door that opened only for him and disappeared. No medal awaited him, no parade, no applause. Only silence. And that was enough. Long after the station lights dimmed and the stars outside moved in silence, the memory of the meeting remained alive. It moved faster than any ship through back-channel secret messages and whispers carried in low voices across metal corridors and cold starfields. The treaty had been signed, the war had never started, and yet the galaxy had changed. In distant systems where planets floated in quiet rotation, leaders replayed the story over and over. One human, one step, no voice, no weapon. And still the Empire had surrendered. On the planet Jesh, 12 hours from a station, a Zarethian elder sat before a council of scholars, his fingers wrapped around a warm stone used in ritual before speaking, and his voice echoed softly in the chamber. We were not defeated, he said, we were taught. The others nodded, and one asked softly, what did we learn? That fear wears many faces, the elder answered, but the one you never hear is the one you never forget. In a merchant hub near the edge of known space, 2 traders exchanged information over spiced drinks. One human, one from the Growl Collective. Heard about the bodyguard, the Growl whispered. Heard, he blinked once, and they surrendered, the human replied. Lies, maybe, the Growl said. But neither laughed. In the orbit above Earth, the diplomat returned to his post, clean uniform, calm voice, eyes always watching every file that passed his screen and every name that crossed his desk. He no longer traveled with a Hyperion. He no longer needed to. The message had been delivered. And across dozens of planets, across stations, across ships, the question began to shift. It was no longer who was the Hyperion. It became, will he come again? On the 4th moon of Elthar, a military academy updated its curriculum. Lesson 12 now began with a single line. If Earth sends a diplomat, look behind him. In an asteroid outpost, once used for mining, now a pirate den, a rough captain growled to her crew as they argued over attacking a human cargo ship. Do it and risk waking the silent shadow, she said, her voice like gravel over steel. They stood down. In the halls of the Zarethian High Court, General Voro stood in quiet before a new mural painted in deep blue and red, at its center the shape of a human, tall and silent, no face, no weapon, just presence. He had not ordered the painting. The artist said she had dreamed it. Delrix stood beside him reading the report from the outer colonies. No resistance, no problems, no threats. They respect the treaty, Delrix said. No, Voro answered, they remember it. A long silence passed between them. Would you fight Earth again? Delrix asked quietly. Voro turned his eyes heavy with thought. I would ask for peace faster. Deep in a hidden mountain range on Earth behind locked doors and soundless halls, the Hyperion walked through stone corridors, his steps soft as armor, quiet, the lights dimmed automatically as he passed. Rooms opened only when he neared doors, responded only to his presence, each wall lined with files, each file a warning waiting to be opened. He entered a chamber without lights, without furniture, without echo. And he stood there. No orders given. No missions planned. No threats active. And still he stood. In time he would be called again, perhaps not soon, perhaps not for years, perhaps not in this galaxy. But he would be called. And the silence would move again. Somewhere on a farming moon, a young boy read about the treaty in a dusty book handed down from his grandfather, his eyes wide, his hands gripping the pages tight. Did the human really stop a war without fighting, he asked. His mother smiled and nodded. Yes, she said. How? Because he was ready to. On a science vessel floating through unclaimed space, a team of researchers debated human psychology. One theory claimed that fear was the only true weapon. Another said no, not fear. Certainty. A commander from a rival empire spoke to her soldiers before entering talks with Earth. Do not test them, she said. Do not press too far. Do not force their silence to break. At a small port station near the rim of neutral space, a new officer watched an Earth diplomat exit a ship, flanked by two aides, calm and respectful. The officer asked, "Is there a bodyguard?" An old engineer nearby laughed once and said, "If there is, you will not see him until it is too late." And the new officer did not laugh back. Back on Earth under the golden sky and strong winds, the diplomat stood on a balcony over the city towers, watching transports rise and fall like metal birds. A small message arrived on his device from the Zarethian court, simple, respectful. "Thank you." He smiled, closed the message, and returned to watching the sky. Beside him, the Hyperion stood for a moment silent, then turned and walked away, vanishing into the building like a shadow returning to its source. He did not speak. He did not wave. He did not need to. The message was already written into history, in books and records and art and memory. One human, one presence, one choice. No war, only silence. And from that silence, peace.